This episode of Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Inside the Breakthrough, a new history of science podcast full of did you know stuff.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
Welcome to a classic episode of the show. As always, we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes by sharing stories of connections with a focus on people who use insulin. Our classic episodes are a look back at some of the people, stories, and research we were talking about at the very beginning of Diabetes Connections back in 2015 and 2016. We have a lot of new listeners since then, and chances are you haven't gone through all 360 plus episodes. So I like bringing these to you with an update on what's going on. So I first spoke to today's guest, Maddy Trumble, back in 2016. And I had forgotten why I went looking for a Broadway type person in the first place back then. Well, it turns out we had just seen Newsies, the Broadway touring company here in Charlotte. And Benny and Leah, my daughter, we were all talking about how athletic a show that is. If you haven't seen it, and there's, the original movie, certainly, but they made a movie out of the Broadway show, and that is really, really worth watching. It is not only singing and dancing, there's a tremendous amount of gymnastics. I mean, the choreography it's incredible and it's exhausting. It's nonstop action. So Benny said to me right after the performance, he said, I wonder how you would do a show like that with type 1 diabetes. He didn't say, could you do it? His question was more like, how do you do that? How do you manage it? Which, as the mom, I really liked that question. So I thought there's got to be somebody we could talk to about that, right? People with type 1 are doing everything. So I put out some feelers and we found Maddy Trumble. She was actually in Newsies, and there's lots more to her story, and I'll give that to you in just a moment. But first, this episode of Diabetes Connections is supported by Inside the Breakthrough, a new history of science podcast that explores the idea of a eureka moment. It's historical wisdom mixed with modern insight, sort of a mashup between a history show and a science show. And it's funny and it's entertaining. It's really well done. The latest episode takes a look at who takes part in psychological studies. The studies that are looking at human behavior that's supposed to be universal. But it turns out most of them only studying a particular group of people that turns out to be anything but universal. It's a great episode full of surprises. I love this show. Search for Inside the Breakthrough anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find it wherever you found this one. This podcast, as you know, is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Did you see the national tour of Mary Poppins? Or maybe Wicked? Or maybe Newsies on Broadway? Then you have seen my guest. Maddy Trumble actually played Mary Poppins in that national tour. She has also played Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West, before she was the Wicked Witch of the West. That's in Wicked, under all of that green makeup, if you've seen that show. And as I mentioned, she's been in Newsies on Broadway as well. She was diagnosed with type 1 as a kid. She always knew she was going to sing and dance and be a performer. I was really excited to talk to Maddy about, how she does all of that and travels. Again, this interview was taped in 2016. And of course, the last year has been difficult for everybody. But when you think about live theater, it's just not happening. Maddy, I reached out to her and got an update. She says she lost her insurance when Broadway shut down. And she was very honest. It wiped out her savings. She was paying for Cobra. So she said, I wasn't willing to give up her pump and her Dexcom. We actually talked about that at the time, about how difficult it was to get insurance when you're not performing steadily. So it was already difficult back in 2016, and it's gotten much more difficult in the past year. She does say, I'm okay for now. I'm living in Chicago with my boyfriend, working at a bakery, waiting for my industry to reopen. And Maddy, I will ping you when things go back to performing and stage shows are happening again. Let's catch up. And boy, would I love to come see you. So here is my interview with Maddy. And I'm calling her Madeline at the beginning for some reason. But here is our interview from 5 years ago. Maddy Trumble, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to talk to you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Stacey.
I have so many questions about performing and what it's like. And, but let me back up to more of the beginning of your story, because you grew up with type 1. When were you diagnosed?
Yeah, I actually was diagnosed technically on the first day of kindergarten. So my dog, Shosh, had just been diagnosed. I don't know how. I can't really remember. I was 4. My dog had been diagnosed with diabetes that summer. My mom has her PhD in child psychology, so this is before the internet. They had all these, medical journals, and she had done lots of research on diabetes, so she knew, the symptoms, like going to the bathroom a lot and being really thirsty. And I remember we went to a friend's birthday party it was like in a park, and the bathroom was like up a really long walk, like up a really steep hill. Mm-hmm. And I just remember I went to the bathroom in the course of like 2 hours, like 6 or 7 times. And I remember walking up that hill. And I remember that was when my mom was like, I think something may be up. So when I went to the doctor to kind of get all your shots and tests for when you start school, my mom was like, can you just throw in a type 1 diabetes test? And so, I found out on the first day of kindergarten. And luckily my blood sugar was not so high that I actually didn't have to be hospitalized. I think it's pretty, as I've heard, it's pretty unusual. But yeah, it was the first day of kindergarten, so I was 4. So I just celebrated 22 years.
Wow.
Me and diabetes. Yeah, 22 years. Yeah.
Oh, and what was your dog's name? That was fast. That went by fast.
Oh, the dog's name was Shosh. It's some other language for bear. I can't remember. My mom is a hippie. My mom is a big hippie. We're from Berkeley, California. Yeah, Shosh.
So what was
a good dog.
Was it funny to have a dog with diabetes and a kid with? Did that confuse your friends at all?
No, we used to we used to do our shots together, and we'd give Shosh her shot, and then I'd get my shot. It was kind of cute. We were bosom buddies, yeah.
I can imagine from your perspective that was pretty helpful in a way. I mean, you had a buddy.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's so hard to remember, but I do remember giving her shots, and then I think I was giving myself my own shots when after a couple of weeks. I know it takes a lot of kids a long time, and I think that made it a little easier because I've been giving my dog her shots for a little while, and so yeah, it was I think it made the transition a little easier in a weird way, but
that's funny.
Yeah, I don't think about that often. My dog having diabetes, I completely forgot. Yeah.
What kind of dog? What was Shosh?
Oh gosh, she was a big mutt. She was big and really big and had long black hair. Not quite sure.
Well, 4 is very young to be diagnosed. I mean, I understand that you don't have a lot of memories other than going up and down that hill. Do you remember growing up with type 1? It's hard to ask again at that age if it changed anything for you, but did you accept it pretty well? Did your friends do okay with it?
Yeah, it is tough to remember. I think I did. I never saw it. I remember that when I was diagnosed, that was the first time I remember at least seeing my parents cry, and I remember thinking that was weird because I didn't know what the big deal was because I was just like my dog. But I like I said, I started giving myself my own shots for right away. Anyway, I don't think I ever saw it kind of as a disability or something I had to deal with. I think I kind of saw it as more of something that made me special. And every summer, starting when I was 5, the next year, we went to diabetes camp. We went to family camp for a few years. And so it was always it's not a good thing, but it brought opportunities, and I met lots of friends that I wouldn't have met if I didn't have it. Yeah, and I don't really remember from being a kid the bad times, which is good. That kind of came later, when I became a teenager and started having some denial that the disease would never go away, which is really, I still have a hard time dealing with that. But when I was a kid, it was whatever, I just give myself shots, and my friends thought it was cool, and all my friends wanted to learn how to, and then when I got a pump in middle school, my friends all wanted to learn how to give me insulin in case I ever needed them in an emergency. So there's always just kind of an opportunity for I don't know. I didn't see it as a negative in my life. That kind of came later.
I totally understand that. My son was diagnosed
Yeah.
very young, at age 2, and we're just getting now to the point where he's in middle school, and he's kind of like, it used to be diabetes is special, and I love my friends from camp, and I just think it's a natural for a teenager to be excited about it would be a little different in a way.
Yeah, it's definitely like it gets old. You're like, oh, this isn't going away.
Yeah. So when did you know you wanted to? When did you know you were interested in theater? Was that something that you always remember, or did something happen when you were a kid to flip that switch?
No, that was always, my dad was an actor. My dad is deaf, and so he kind of became an actor kind of by accident. He was never went to school for it, but back in the 80s when Children of a Lesser God was on Broadway, there's one character in the show who is deaf but needs to have very good speech, and my dad speaks really well, has really good speech for a deaf person. And anyway, so I can't remember the exact story, but somehow he fell into this Broadway show, and so he lived in New York for a while, and he was like a lover of musical theater, and so was my mom. So we just like always had it growing up. I remember my first I was obsessed with The Wizard of Oz and all the old movie musicals when I was little. And I don't think it never was like a decision that was made. And then my mom, I'm from the Bay Area, from Berkeley, and there's a ton of great community theater there. And so my brother and I, just one day, my mom was like, you should go audition for Annie Get Your Gun, which, has kids in it. And we went and auditioned, and I sang Singing in the Rain I had an umbrella as a prop. And and my brother and I, both were cast in the show. And kind of that's sort of what changed it. I was 7 and he was 9, and we both really fell in love. And then my little sister too eventually started doing it, and she's still acting now. She's on the Sound of Music tour. Going around America right now. So yeah, it was always in a family affair. We all did it. We all did shows together. Made it easier for my mom. She had like one place to drive after school instead of 3.
So you have 3 of a brother and a sister?
Yeah, there's the 3 of us, yeah.
Great. I have a very ignorant question, but you said your father loved musical theater. It's hard for me to understand how someone who's deaf can have that sort of appreciation. Can you try to explain some of that to me?
Sure. Yeah, I remember him talking about, he's an actor, and to us, musical theater is so much about the music, but if you watch, he loved Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, and he loved Funny Girl, Barbara Streisand, because she's such a fantastic actor, and her hands, her fingers, and her fingernails. I don't know if anyone loves Barbara Streisand as much as I do, but she has the longest fingers and uses her hands in a really interesting way. And so my dad, it's all visual for him. He can't hear the music, but, and Gene Kelly is so fun to watch. You could watch him without music and it would still be entertaining. But I think it's like the visuals in musical theater. And he was an actor, so he talked about what to do with your hands and how hands are really important, obviously, for him, because that's how he talks. But, so it was the visuals in musical theater, I think, more for him. And the style of acting, I suppose, also, because it can be a bit more exaggerated, and which is something that would speak to him, I suppose. I've never asked him about that, but he was really into Gene Kelly. Singing in the Rain was another one of my favorites.
Oh, I've seen that movie a million times. My sister and I.
It's so good.
we had in the olden days, we taped it off of PBS one time with our VCR, and we watched it over and over and over again. And when I see it now, I wait for the pause because there was a pledge drive when we taped it. And so in the middle, every 40 minutes or so, they would interrupt it for 20 minutes. So I know exactly where those pauses come. That is such a great movie, though.
Pledge drive. Oh, yeah. So good. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about performing, though, with type 1 diabetes as a teenager, as a kid. I imagine you had to do a few things to help yourself out. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm not I'm trying to think of stories from when I was a kid. I'm not really remembering. The only thing
Go ahead.
remember, I got a pump in the summer before 6th grade, which is when I played Annie and Annie. And I remember having to do that and having it show through my costumes. And that was honestly, that for me as a kid, again, I was, no big deal. That was the biggest deal. I remember thinking, because when you're performing, you usually have to wear a microphone as well, so it's like you have one extra machine on you. Anyway, so that's what I remember. I'm trying to think of something that happens maybe that I.
That's okay. I'm just curious. Did your parents, like when you're performing, did they want you to check your blood sugar before? Did you have snacks backstage, or do you?
Oh yeah,
that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because when I've been lucky enough to get to play a lot of leads in shows and who don't really lead the stage. I'm just thinking like when I played Mary Poppins, when I played Mary Poppins, you kind of really rely on, you have a dresser who kind of meets you backstage. Every time you're off stage, you give you water and if you need to change your costume or fix your makeup, they're kind of there, but you're never really off stage for more than 20 seconds.
Wow.
So I'd always, they always had glucose tabs or juice, and I would always, and when I was a kid too, I'd have like a little box on either side of the stage and in my dressing room, and yeah, because it's really, it's scary to be low no matter what, but it's really scary to be low when you're in the middle of the show and doing a dance number, and I've never had any major, anything. I've never been so low, but there's been a couple times where it gets a little scary, and you can't leave the stage really. I remember one time Mary Poppins, we were doing Step in Time, which is this huge, like 12-minute long tap number, and I was starting to feel low, and then it kind of really hit me in the middle of that number, which was a really, really bad time. And then you don't leave the stage again for another 10 minutes, and I've thought every time I do a show, I'm like, there's going to be a point where I leave the stage or I'm going to have to stop, and it's just going to have to be okay, because it's just going to have to be okay, because that's the most important thing is not the show, is my health. But I've been lucky. I haven't had to.
Do you ever think about keeping like glucose tabs in your costume? Because, I know Mary Poppins can't be eating in the middle of Step in Time, but you could like sneak it or something like that.
No, I never did. That's a good. There was always some. I guess if I'm ever in a show where I can't leave the stage for a long time, I will 100% have to have something. But Mary Poppins was that one scene was strange when I was low, because I was on stage for like 20 minutes straight. Usually I could run off stage if I needed to. And there's always someone nearby. And, I always tell everyone on the first day, stage management, just so they know. And everyone's always very understanding and always so curious about it. And I should come to rehearsals with like a brochure, some literature for them to read. But I just tell them, and they're usually, I've not had any crazy thing I've had to deal with yet.
Do you have a blood sugar?
Knock on wood.
Yeah. Do you have a blood sugar goal, and you certainly don't need to share specific numbers with us, that you like to be in, or a range that you like to be in when you are performing at the beginning of the show?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Normal for me is like a little higher, I think, than most people's. I like to be between 1 and 150. And right before the podcast, I was 137, so I'm patting myself on the back for that. But definitely the before a show, because the adrenaline and everything, it's so and just running around. And I just did last year. I did Evita, and I played Ava Perón, which is the lead, and like she really, I left the stage a lot, but every time I was backstage, I was changing my costume and my wig, and so it was just really, there was never a moment to sit down, never a moment to test my blood. So I'd like to start ideally like around 200, because my blood sugar is not going to go up when I'm doing a show. It's only going to go down. So that would be that's ideal. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah. Do you wear an insulin pump during the show still? You kind of mentioned that earlier. I'm just curious. So do you keep it on under your costume?
Yeah, I do. I'm trying to think if I think I took it off for Evita because that one was so short. The first act is like the first and second act are both about an hour. And there were so many costume changes and so it's so much running around. I think I did take it off of that one. But yeah, Mary Poppins also, I think it would be different with costumers are so fantastic and can figure out where to place it. But with Mary Poppins, there was no way anyone was going to see. So Mary Poppins, I had to have 2 microphones because they give you one. You use one, but then you have a backup in case the first one dies or goes dead because there isn't time to change your microphone. So I'd have 2 microphones and my insulin pump. But no one saw it because I had these huge dresses and a bustle. So I usually put them like on the small of my back. So no one's going to see them but I'm trying to think if I've ever had a costume where I was worried about it being seen. I don't think so. I've been lucky to be very clothed in all my shows.
What kind of pump do you use?
I have a Mini Med, and I've had a Mini Med forever. A Mini Med Paradigm. It's purple. It's very pretty.
Do you use a continuous glucose monitor with it?
I don't, but I have a girlfriend in New York who I actually met in Chelsea Market. I don't know if you went there when you were there. It's just really cool, just like walk through market. Anyway. And we were in the bathroom at Chelsea Market, and this girl with like really beautiful red hair had and she had like a really cool outfit on, and she had the purple pump like on the outside of her pants, which I thought was really cool. And because I never wear, like, you can never see my pump. It's always somewhere hidden. And she was just wearing it on her jeans with her cool outfit. And I just said, I was like, oh, I like your pump. I have the same one. And first of all, for me to start a conversation with anybody on the streets of New York is really unusual. But I'm so glad I did because she was like, I just moved to New York. And I'm just wondering, like, can I get your phone number? And maybe we can hook up for lunch. And it turned out that we had a lot of friends in common because she's also in theater. And anyway, she's like become my girlfriend. What was I saying? Oh, I just hung out with her the other day, and she just got a Dexcom, and she has an Apple Watch. And she was just showing me. She was like, look, I'm just looking at my watch, and it tells me what my blood sugar is. So I do not have a continuous glucose monitor, and my mom has been trying to convince me for years to get one. But I've just always been weird about having a second machine attached to me. But it's so clear. My friend Claire was showing me it's so small, and I don't know. I'm going to have to really think about it because it seems like kind of a really cool thing.
Well, we've used ours since for 3 years now. So if you would like to know the opinion of someone who's 9, he was 9 when he started. So he can.
You guys love it?
I do. I think that there are. How to say this? So first thing is I'm the parent, right? I'm not the person with diabetes.
Right.
So I, of course, love it because it helps me take care of him in a way that finger sticks, didn't give me the window that I wanted. But my perspective is not his. He likes it because he doesn't finger stick as much. And everybody uses it differently, and it's not labeled to not do finger sticks yet. But that's really why, if you ask him, that's why he likes it, and it gets his mother off his back because I can just see his numbers and I don't have to ask him what's going on.
Do you see them? Can you see them on your phone?
Yes.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, so
that's
he
cool.
needs with the current Dexcom, he can have it on his cell phone or a receiver, and then I can see it on my cell phone. And he is the one who wears the watch. He has a Pebble watch, which is a little less expensive than the Apple Watch, and he wears the Pebble Watch, so he can see it, and it's more discreet for him in school. He doesn't want to pull out his cell phone because nobody's allowed to have a cell phone at school, so he keeps his cell phone in his backpack, and then he can just look at his watch. But for us, the best thing about the Dexcom is seeing trends, because he's overnight, his numbers can be bananas because of puberty and everything else, and that to me is the number one advantage, is you really get a window And I've already done a commercial for Dexcom in this podcast, so that's another one.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think it's something I definitely need to look into it. I have an appointment next week with my endocrinologist, and they've also want me to get. I have a new one this year, but a new endocrinologist. He's been trying to convince me. I mean, it seems like a pretty cool thing. I was just so hesitant because, it's also hard. I've had diabetes for so long, and I've kind of been doing the same thing the whole time. And the thought of having something else come in and kind of interrupt what I know is scary. But also at the same time, I've seen technology grow, because in the last 23 years, that's when I first started. My first meter was 45. It might have been 60 seconds. I think it was 60 seconds and a huge drop of blood, and then 45, and then 30, and then 15, and now 5. And, then I got the pump at a certain point. And so, but for the last 15 years or so, I've been doing the same thing. So that's what scares me, but I really should welcome it. It's exciting. And sometimes I don't always feel when I'm getting high, and I'll test and I'll be shocked. So I think that would be a good thing to have, because it would kind of, it kind of alerts you.
Well, we love it, but at the same time, I totally understand what you're saying. Okay. I mean, I have a lot of friends who, it's funny when you have somebody in your family who's diagnosed, suddenly everybody comes out of the woodwork and you realize that you knew people. And I have a friend who, he tested one of the first pumps when he was in middle school, and it was a painful process. I mean, this is 30 years ago. Yeah. So it turned him off for pumps forever. Wow. And then he's got a pump in his 40s. He just didn't want to do it. He was doing fine. He had good control, and he loves it. But, if he didn't, he would go back to what he was doing before. So you do it. Here's mom's advice. You do what's right for you. Go check it out, but don't feel pressured. But how cool is it that you made a friend? It's always funny when you see people with a pump or checking their blood sugar. Because, sometimes you don't want to be weird, but it's so cool when you are able to say something. That's great.
Yeah. And I feel like I see them all the time on the subway, and I never want to say anything. But for some reason, we looked like we were cut from the same cloth. So I'm glad I said hi, and maybe I will again next time I see somebody with a pump.
Cool. So how did you get to New York? I mean, I know it's a long process, but as you mentioned, you're from Berkeley, and you were performing as a kid. But a lot of people try to make it in theater. What was the I mean, not the whole process, obviously, but how did you do it?
Yeah, so I grew up doing theater, and my mom is so incredibly supportive. I don't know how. She loves theater, and it was never a question of should I do this or. Anyway, so I found out. I think we were in New York City when I was in high school. We were seeing some shows, and I started noticing that people in their bios and playbills were listing where they went to school. And I think I didn't even really know that you can major, you can get a BFA in musical theater, and I didn't know that you could even do that. I think I kind of figured you had to go to NYU for acting, or, I didn't know any better. And so I was seeing bios, and I was seeing all these people. So many people had the University of Michigan in their bio, so I went up to a couple people after the shows at the stage door and chatted with them about, and actors are so nice, and, they talked to me about the schools they went to, and so I looked into Michigan. They had a summer program for rising seniors, so the summer before my senior year, I did a 3-week musical theater intensive with the head of the University of Michigan Department of Musical Theater. So I did that, and then I loved the school. I loved the faculty, and I auditioned, and I think 3 of us from the summer program got into the school. So I went to the University of Michigan for musical theater, and I did that for 4 years. And that was a tough 4 years because I had never really had any sort of training, or I took voice lessons here and there and some acting classes, maybe every other year. But I just did shows because it was fun. I liked to be in plays, and to all of a sudden be in a university setting where I was being graded on my acting and my singing and dancing was so strange to me. So I kind of had a hard adjustment. And, it's an incredibly competitive environment. there were 19 people in my class. So you have a group of like 100 kids, and everyone wants to be on Broadway, and everybody wants to get the part in the show. And it was definitely a hard 4 years. But I think that's what made me grow so much. And anyway, so I did 4 years at university. And then we did a senior showcase, which a lot of musical theater programs do. They put together like a 45-minute show, and everyone gets a couple minutes to kind of show themselves and what they do best. So some people in my class danced. Some people did like a little song and dance. Some people, I just stood there and sang because that's what I do best, I guess. And a bunch of industry people come, agents and casting directors. And so from that, I got an agent. Most people sign with an agent. But then also from that, which doesn't always happen, but I got an audition for Mary Poppins. The casting director of Mary Poppins came to the showcase, and he actually called in like pretty much all the girls from my class went in and auditioned. And I had an audition, and it went fine, but then I went away for the summer, and I never heard anything. And then I got a call. All of a sudden, I was doing a show in St. Louis. I was doing summer stock, and they said, "Hi, can you come in for a callback for Mary Poppins? It's this day." So I had to take time off from St. Louis and go to this audition, and I got the show like right away. They called me when I was walking out of my audition, and they said it was Thursday, and they said, "Can you start rehearsals on Monday?" So so I started on Monday. So that all happened so incredibly fast, and I did the tour twice. I toured with Mary Poppins 2 times, so this was the first time I did it. So I don't know if it was luck or timing or something, but so I did that tour for 6 months, and then we closed, and then I moved to New York City. So I moved to New York City kind of in a great spot. I had all these friends in the industry, and I'd gotten to save up some money, and I lived with a girl that I had toured with, and I was really lucky because a lot of people move to New York City. They go for their senior showcase, and then they're just there, and they have to, like my little sister did that. She went and she did her showcase, and she got an agent, and then she had to find a restaurant job and somehow come up with rent money because living in New York is so expensive. And I was incredibly lucky that my New York journey kind of started off. And it also started off a little late, and it was cool that I got to go to New York, and I had a show on my resume, so auditioning was a little easier. That was a very long-winded story.
No, that was great. That was great. And then and then after you moved to New York, you understudied and were in a few other plays, right? You were in Newsies and you were in Wicked.
Yeah. Well, so I'm trying to think of, so I moved to New York, and kind of right away, I think I'd been there for 6 months, and then I got Newsies really quickly, and I did that for a few months. And then I did Mary Poppins again. So then I toured again, and then I came back to New York, and then I did Wicked, and I actually did the tour of Wicked, and then I toured again with Wicked, and then I came back. So I've been in and out of New York since I got here. People ask me how long I've been in New York, and I feel like I'm lying to them when I say 5 years, because it's really not been that long. But yeah, so everything just kind of happened really fast, and I got really lucky kind of right away. And then these last 2 years, I left Wicked about 2 years ago. These last 2 years have been pretty slow, which has been tough to deal with because I had so much success so fast. And this is kind of, right now I'm experiencing what most young actors experience in New York, kind of I go to auditions pretty much every week, and they go well, and there's always some reason you don't get it. It's really stupid. Like the last one, I was too tall. The one before that, I was too young, which is good. At least I wasn't too old. It never has to do with talent, and I'm still getting used to the rejection is tough. I'm getting better at realizing that it's really not about me. It's not personal.
But let me ask you
go ahead.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say it's tough when you're in New York with thousands of other fantastic actors because you can be as specific as you want. You don't have to sort of make any sort of concessions. The casting directors are like, I want that person to have shorter hair so that then they can find that person. So, it's really tough, and there's so many talented people. So I'm just really lucky that I'm in a spot where I I have girlfriends and guy friends who aren't even, they aren't even getting the auditions they want. They're like a whole step further behind me in a way, because I'm at least getting the auditions. That's step one, and that's really tough too, to even get the auditions. Because if you think about, there's thousands of people and hundreds of agents submitting their clients for one audition, so they can only see 10 people. So the fact that I even get to audition is like a great feat. So I'm at least thankful for that, but I would like a job. That would be nice.
Well, and that leads me to what I was going to ask, which is, as a parent of a child with type 1, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, how is she paying for her supplies? And I'm trying to do the math. Are you? And this is a super nosy question, so you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But are you on your parents' insurance? Like, how do you do this?
Okay, so I was on my parents' insurance, but then I turned 26, right? So that was last year. So then all of a sudden, so I get my health insurance. We have fantastic health insurance. I get it through the union, through the Actors Equity Association, and the insurance they give us is so great. It's incredibly affordable, and the diabetes supplies are actually we have a really great deal with them, and I don't really pay anything for my insulin or my strips, which is kind of fantastic. And anyway, but I get it through my union, so you have to, they give you insurance based on the amount of weeks you worked in a year. So this year, I have literally worked 5 weeks, and you need 11 weeks to get 6 months of insurance or 19 weeks to get a year. So I am losing my insurance January 1st, which is super scary. And it just kind of adds a whole other element to when I go into these auditions.
Oh, wow.
I have to stop doing this, but I keep thinking, the stakes are so high for me for so many reasons, because I love a job, I love money, but also I really just need to work so I can keep my insurance, my fantastic insurance. So thank goodness for Obamacare and not being able to refuse people because of, pre-existing conditions, because I don't know what I would do if that was the case. But yeah, it's scary. So January 1st, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have to figure something out. But yeah, no, it's been incredibly affordable the last few years, which is great. And then I think January 1st that will change, which is super disappointing. It's that's kind of always been and I watched the weeks tick away. This last year, I would watch them go, and every audition I'd go to, I'd be like, okay, it starts this date and then finishes this date. So if I get it, I'd have enough weeks to, I lost it this year. So that's kind of been tough. That more than anything else has made me kind of reevaluate if this is the right thing to do, because it shouldn't be about that when I'm auditioning and singing and acting. It shouldn't be about getting health insurance, but that's kind of what it's been about for the last year. And it's just, it's kind of stressful and
I
not
think
fun.
That's such a common, unfortunately, such a common thought among people with any chronic condition. And I hear it all the time in the diabetes community that people are staying in jobs they don't want, or they're working for money that they need to only go to insurance. And that is tough stuff. Let's talk a little bit. I don't want to completely change the subject here, but okay. And this is another nosy question. So since you've been in a lot of auditions this year, but haven't had steady theater work, did you take another job? Did you take a waitressing job? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I don't think I've been super smart about it. I had a lot of money saved up from touring, because when you tour, you get a per diem and your paycheck, so you kind of just get to pocket your paycheck, which is pretty fantastic. So I had a lot of savings from 3 years of touring. So I've kind of been living off of that, and it's tricky because every time I have an audition and have a callback and then have a second and third callback, which happens all the time, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get it. So I keep putting off getting a real high-paying sort of side job. But yes, I have a little teeny tiny part-time job at Soul Cycle, which is spinning studio, which I love so much. But I'm kind of in the process of thinking about what else I should do. I used to take headshots, which take pictures for actors, which is kind of a great thing to do on the side for money. And I haven't done that in a couple of years just because I don't know, I just have I'm not sure why, but I'm thinking about doing that kind of just to make some extra money now to pay for my health insurance. And I luckily have not had to waitress yet. I think I would be pretty terrible at it. I'm going to avoid that. But that is kind of that's the best way to make money. I mean, my sister was doing that before she left on tour and was saving money in the bank. But she was working really hard, and I would not want to be a server in New York. I think it would be a tough job. New Yorkers are tough, and especially when they're eating, they want things to be perfect. The standards are really high. I'm not sure I'd be good at that.
That's funny.
And then I've done little side jobs, like I do little temp things, and I babysit sometimes. And but yes, no, I've had to kind of pick up some stuff to make some extra money because. Yeah.
See, I heard from a few people. I put out I put on Facebook that I was talking with you, and you've actually answered most of the questions that people had, which were about performing with lows and hiding glucose and things like that, and what pump you use.
Oh yeah.
But I think a lot of the kids look at this and think, wow, what a glamorous career, and I really want to do that. And listen, if you are interested in theater, you are passionate about it. But I hate to say I'm glad to hear you talking about that, because it's not a side of the working actor that we hear a lot about.
No, that's something not, and it's not something I ever thought about, or even in college. They say we'd have people come in and chat, but the people who would come in, so they'd have master classes and labs with, alumni, but all the ones who came in were the ones who are working consistently and live really glamorous lives and who make a lot of money. No one ever came in and said, sometimes you don't make money, and sometimes it's stressful, and sometimes you lose your health insurance, and sometimes you really get, when you're going on. I mean, I haven't gotten, and I pretty much had an audition every week and gotten called back for a year, and I haven't gotten anything for over a year. So that is hard. Just the rejection is really tough, because I'm pretty good at laughing about it. It usually takes a day. I usually have to go to bed. I get really sad, and then I go to bed, and I wake up the next morning. I'm like, okay, I can do this. Yeah, it's tough though it's constant. It's constant no's, and that's tough. And I go back and forth between blaming myself, because it's really not my fault, but it's hard when when you see all your friends kind of succeeding, and which is and I hate that. I hate comparing myself to them and feeling like I'm competing with other people, because you are, but you're not. And so it's tough. It's really tough. But then when it's good, it's so good. So yeah,
I would think that's got to be so normal and so awful in those theater groups when people are working and people aren't working. It's got to be crazy.
Yeah.
That's got to be crazy.
And it's funny because we're all at a different place. Like I said, I have girlfriends who they would kill to be having the auditions I have. But then one of my best friends, just turned down a big Broadway show because, he's kind of at a different level than me, and he decided that wasn't really what he wants to be doing. And, so that's his heartbreak, is that he, they wouldn't give him enough money to do the show he wanted to do. So, I have a hard time sympathizing with that, but also I have to realize that everyone's in a different stage. Sorry, my alarm just went off for some reason. Anyway, so I just, everyone is dealing with their own, and then I have another friend who I just auditioned for him last week. He's, supervising a show I want to do, or that I was auditioning for, and I didn't get it. And I, texted him and I said, I'm sad I didn't get it, and I don't really know what to do anymore, and, I can't catch a break. And he goes, yeah, Maddy, I totally understand. I'm with you. I can't even get the auditions I want. And in my head, I'm like, but I auditioned for you. So, everyone, but he's still, he wants to be auditioning for other new Broadway shows, and he can't get those auditions, and blah, blah, blah. So everyone's got their own heartbreak. It's, kind of no matter what level you're at. But then when it's good, and when I get to be playing my dream roles and getting paid to, do, sing this music I want to sing, when I got to do Evita, which is my dream role, and it's fantastic. And when I get to be Wicked, and people are so impressed with me because I'm in Wicked, then it's great. But then, so that makes it worth it, I suppose. But right now I'm kind of trying to decide just how worth it is. Yeah, it's just tough. It's tough.
You're at a crossroads. That's really wild.
Yeah, I definitely am.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to keep talking to you over the next couple of years. Who knows what will happen?
I know.
So this time of year, I was trying to think, and I'll edit this part out, but I may end up running this before Thanksgiving. So that'll either set up or take out this next question. So for many people, their yearly or their biggest exposure to theater is that Macy's Day Parade, where Broadway performers, walk down, the street in New York, and it's amazing. And every show has a musical number. And I DVR this every year and fast forward through all the nonsense and just watch the musical numbers. Have you ever been that, or that's got to be freezing and hard work, and you're up early, but everybody's always smiling and it looks like a lot of fun. What's that all about?
I have not done that because I have not been lucky enough to be in a show that's happening during that time. But it's such a little teeny tiny world we live in. So I'm friends with like everyone who does those shows, and everyone does the parades. I heard it's pretty freezing, and they all look so happy. But I think it is kind of like, that's a cool thing to do. And you're like, oh my God, on the Macy's Day Parade, that's kind of what this business, when you get to work in it, it's kind of constant things. Like I watched other people do this when I was a kid, and so that's pretty cool. You're like, oh, these are my dreams coming true. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
so, yeah. I think that's kind of what people are like. I don't care. It's cold. Like, I used to sit at home, every Thanksgiving morning, and I remember back during Mary Poppins, I got to play San Francisco, and I was like, I used to come and watch people. Sorry, I'm emotional. I used to come and watch people on this stage, and now little kids are watching me. So that's pretty cool. And that's why you do it. I mean, we do it because we love it so much, not because it's easier, not because you get paid well, or it's we love it so much and have always loved it. And I think all of us, if we could do anything else, if I could do anything else, I would do it. But I don't really want to. So, yeah. And that's why I'm still here.
When you're talking about performing for those kids, and you were one of those kids once, watching the show in San Francisco, I know that you've met some kids after the show who have type 1 diabetes on the tour and probably elsewhere. What's that like for you?
Well, first of all, they're all so much better at taking care of themselves than I am. I'm so impressed with all of them. They're super inspirational because and it's cool because I've never realized that until talking about it today, that it did not used to get me down. Even before, when it was harder to take care of it, in the 90s when it took 45 seconds for my result to come out. But I didn't used to let it get me down, and these kids don't either. It's just something cool about them, and something different, and something they get to talk about, and something that their friends don't have that makes them special. So it's always I think with anything, when you meet kids who are like you, or it's the same with performing. When I, every once in a while when I get to teach classes or meet kids who are actors, they just do it because it's fun and they love it. They don't do it because they want to make money or they want to win an award. They just do it because they love it. And I think it's cool to I think it's cool to meet kids who remind you of you and remind you that and it's cool because I'm trying to remember my role models. There was this girl group called the Pump Girls. Oh my gosh, I wonder what happened to them. They had a CD and they all had diabetes, and I'm trying to think. I didn't have any role models with diabetes, or I didn't have anyone to look up to who did what I did, who had diabetes. Who I could say, they did it, and it was no problem for them. And so that's kind of cool. Not that I fancy myself a role model, but I hope I can be.
Oh, you are, definitely.
Yeah.
I have a Facebook question for you. So Trish writes on Facebook, my high school theater major loves her, meaning you, Maddie, and she wants to know if you have an education program for rising stars.
Oh.
I mean, is there, I know you went to college for this, but there is an education program you recommend?
You mean at a college level?
I would think either a college level, a summer program, something that you might recommend to help kids get on the track.
Oh, gosh. There's so many musical theater departments now, so many more than when I feel like there's new ones popping up all the time. University of Michigan was great. It's the faculty is kind of all changed now, and I'm not quite sure exactly how the department's being run. Oh my gosh, there's so many. I would say, and there's so many that we think we need to go to. Like, I thought I needed to go to Michigan, and obviously I went there for a reason. But I know people who go to smaller schools and who love them, and people who go to big universities and love them. I think it's about like doing all the research. Also, it's probably so easy now with, God, there's probably so many resources on the internet. I'd say do the research and visit if you can and see which works best for you. I'm trying to think of like training programs, like classes. I have a friend who has a business who, oh gosh, this is terrible that I can't remember it. I'll post it on the Facebook group. He has a business where it's him and he takes other like Broadway folks with him and Broadway stars, and they'll go and travel to schools and high schools. And I know there's a couple organizations that do this, and they'll teach classes and they'll perform for you guys. I did it one time. I went to a little tiny town in Texas. They were doing Mary Poppins, and I taught a master class. I think it's called Straight Out of New York. This is the worst answer ever. You're going to have to edit all of this out.
You can just send it to me, too.
I haven't taken a class in so long. I probably should. Maybe I would do better at my auditions if I took a class. But yeah, I wouldn't even know where to tell someone where to start. Gosh, I will think about that, and I will get back to that person on the Facebook page.
That would be great. Yeah, definitely let me know. How funny. There was also a question about, you must have a pretty crazy schedule. Even when you're just auditioning, you don't have a regular 9 to 5. So the question of how do you manage diabetes? Do you have a routine or a special diet or, anything that helps you out?
The short answer is no, which I'm constantly trying to be better and trying to find that routine. But yeah, it's tricky because every day is different. Some days I work at a gym essentially, and we have 6 a.m. classes. So some days I have to be there at 5:30 in the morning. But then other days, like today, I slept in, and tomorrow I'll sleep in. And then the next day I'll wake up at 4 in the morning. And so every day is so different. Yeah, it's tricky. And I just test a lot, which is why I should get the Dexcom. I test a lot and I try to keep up with everything. Yeah, it's tough when there's no routine. And as far as diet goes, I try my hardest to I'm also vegetarian, which doesn't really have any effect on diabetes, but I feel like I maybe eat more carbs than the average person because I don't eat meat. So I'm pretty good at counting carbs, I will say. I've got that going for me. I do a lot of carb counting and a lot of like bolus wizarding on my pump to take out my guesswork because my guesswork's pretty bad. But yeah, it's a constant struggle. I still get surprised by highs more often than I'd like. I'm not low often, which is good, I guess. But yeah, I always have Lara bars with me. I always have fruit with me in case I need it. But yeah, no, there's a lot of growth to be done, and yeah. I'm glad I'm seeing I'm glad I'm going to the doctor next week because I definitely need their help.
Well, listen, I always think it's interesting when I talk to people like you because I kind of hear you almost like apologizing that you're not like a perfect diabetes role model. It's so funny. But, that's what this life is all about. I mean, there are people who are absolutely amazing and, they seem to have it down. But I like talking to people like you, too, who are very realistic and understand.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, this is not a game of perfect.
Yeah, nope, it's not. And I thank goodness. But and I apologize all the time. I always feel guilty about it, which I need to get over that part about it because it's hard for everyone. Even my girlfriend with the Dexcom the other day, she was like, oh, I was like 300 the other day. And I don't know why that made me feel better about it, but I was like, she's that high and she has a Dexcom. So, it's tough. And I had a girlfriend actually who did Wicked with me who also was a diabetic, which is fun. I had never worked with one before. She didn't have a pump. She had a Dexcom, and she had such unbelievable control. She's the most like regimented, disciplined person I've ever met. And so for her, a high would be like if she was like in the 200s, she'd be like, oh my God, that would be a big deal for her. She really made me feel like I felt like I was constantly apologizing to her. She made me feel like the worst diabetic. Not intentionally, I did that to myself, but she was pretty great at taking care of herself. And she ate like paleo, and she counted every carb and every gram of protein and calorie, and it's pretty incredible to watch her take care of herself. She was really good at it. Definitely an inspiration. Yeah. I will never ever be like that, even if I tried my hardest, just because I don't have that personality, but it was something to aspire to. Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, it doesn't sound like you're doing half bad. I mean, I know you're not working as much as you'd like to, but I still think it's been fantastic talking to you and learning about this life. That's very cool. So keep us posted. I didn't even ask you for theater tickets or anything. I was very good.
I wish I could give you some. I want some too.
Oh, I know what I forgot to say. So I just want to let you know. Yeah. So the reason I wanted to talk to you was over the summer, Newsies came through Charlotte and where we live. Yeah. And so we all went to see it. And my son, who has type 1, we were watching it. And if you haven't seen it before, it's a very intensive dance show. I mean, the choreography is amazing. It's dance and gymnastics, and it's incredible. And he said to me, I wonder how somebody with type 1 diabetes would perform in a show like that. Not could they, but just how would they do it? And so that's when I went on this search to try to find somebody who'd fit on Broadway. And so how fun to find you. And you'd been in Newsies. And you guys just had like a kind of a mini reunion of some of the cast members, right? Didn't you do like a one-night performance in New York?
Yeah, we just did a little like reunion concert. We did one last year. I think it's gonna be an annual thing. Some of the original, well, not just original, any Newsies. We got together and we sang some songs. I sang with Kara, who I did the show with, and then we did Wicked together too. So we sang a song from Wicked, which was kind of fun because it's so rare that you get to work with someone twice in this business. So. It was super fun. It was fun to get to see all our friends again and sing songs from the show. It's great. And we're going to do that next year probably, sometime in the summer.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
All right.
I'll keep you guys posted.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It was great to talk with you.
Yes, thanks, Stacey, so much. This was great.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
I will link up lots of videos. You can see Maddy perform, and that'll be at diabetes-connections.com on the episode homepage. I really, really miss shows. Obviously, I'm not a performer. I was a wannabe performer when I was a kid. I wanted to be an actress. That changed once I realized how much talent you did need to have. But I love, love, love musicals and shows. And this year, I seriously considered starting a second podcast all about Broadway shows. And I may still do that someday. I mean, who knows? Never say never. But we'll see. I miss it so much. I can't wait to go back and see people performing. There is nothing like live theater. All right. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. Our regular episodes air every Tuesday, classic episodes every Thursday. So I'll see you back here in just a couple of days. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Simms Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.